Welcome to episode 18 of Friends of the Show. I am Stephen W. Skinner. This is the podcast where I talk to some of the funniest and most interesting friends I know. They're the friends of the show. This week's friend is Phil Stamato, a New York-based writer and comedian who contributes to Splitsider, a great comedy website. We have a great chat about how he went from classical phrases to comedy stages and have a great time along the way. Join us, won't you? Friends of the Show, episode 18 with Phil Stamato. Right now.
In nova fert animus mutatas dicere formas, corpora, di coeptis ambos mutastis et illa, adspirate meis primaque origine mundi, ad mea perpetuum deducite tempora carmen. And that means something along the lines of, my mind takes me to speak of forms changed into new bodies. Gods, upon my beginnings, for you've changed those too, breathe. And from the first origin of the world to my own times, draw out a song eternal.
Wow, wowee, what a quote. So, welcome, Phil. Today's guest is Phil Stamato. Welcome to the show, Phil. That was quite the quote.
Thanks. You know, I do my gosh darndest best.
And shout out to Ovid for letting us use that quote.
Heck yeah. I'm sure he's very proud right now. He's like, yes, this is what I intended for my work to end up on podcasts.
You finally cracked through the podcast barrier. So, yeah. Very interesting. Not the first Latin quote. We have had one before, but definitely very interesting. And your pronunciation was, I'm assuming, spot on. Sounded perfect.
I strive for it, you know.
But we'll get into that later, why you can read that with such aplomb. So a little bit for the listeners about you. Phil is a very funny guy who does comedy. He's a contributor to Splitsider, which is a great comedy website. And you can check out all of his stuff at philstamato.com. But I guess before I start the show, we should mention how to pronounce your name. Am I doing it correctly?
Stamato.
So some people say Stamato. Right? Have you ever heard that joke before, Phil? Is that
yes.
Something that follows you around? People wanted me to ask that. Do you say Stamato or do you say Stamato?
Stamato. And yeah, I've heard that's one of the things I hear a lot. I hear also, what's Stamato with you? I like that one a lot.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah, it's like if I ever start my own podcast, I'll call it Phil Stamato with you or something like that.
Oh, that's perfect. I guess it does, there's bright sides to having a name like that where people walk into the obvious joke every single time.
Me and Mark McGark were talking about this the other day, where it's like every time we say our name, it's kind of like Groundhog Day, where you repeat the same interaction.
Yeah, you have to explain every single time.
Right. It's not like really annoying or anything. It's just like, I'm used to it.
Yeah, you get used to
Mark,
it.
Every time it's always the same one for Mark, where it's just like, is that really your name? And he's like, yes.
And yes, shout out to Mark McGark at Markedly on Twitter, one of my favorite friends of the show.
Oh, yeah.
Alrighty, so yes, thank you for joining us, and I guess let's jump right into it. So your story is going to cover your transition from classics to comedy, the Phil Stamato story.
So just start in the beginning?
Start from the beginning. It's the best place to start.
Sure. In the beginning, as I always like to say, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was from God, and the Word was God. And then my family moved to upstate New York. I studied Latin when I was in high school, and I got really into Latin and Greek while I was in there because I had a really amazing teacher. Because of that, because he was too good of a teacher, I then spent an entire decade studying Latin and Greek.
Wow, that is a really good teacher.
Yeah, really effectively good teacher. So I ended up getting I used to come home every single day from school and regale my parents with stories that I had learned from my teacher, Mr. Highland. Shout out, Mr. Highland.
Shout out.
And I would just tell them stories, and they were like, you should pursue this as far as you can. And the only career options for Latin really are teacher, which makes sense. You can't really be an emperor anymore, but not in any official sense, you know.
Yeah, and it's not something you can... Emperor isn't something you can really work your way up to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just far too competitive these days. You know, so I wanted to be
Latin.
a teacher. How was that?
So you love Latin.
I love Latin. And so I wanted to be a teacher. I go to college. I love Latin even more in college. I got really sucked into this thing for a while called Neo-Latin. And there's a whole community on the internet of people who write and speak Latin with each other, like a more modernized version of it, so it has modern words. And if you were to go on YouTube and look up Philippus Noster, I have a couple of ukulele songs I translated into Latin.
Okay. So you were part of this neo movement here?
Yeah,
You got into it?
And there's kind of like a guy who was one of my favorite bloggers in Latin to follow. His name was Nemo Udes, which means nobody in Latin and Greek.
Oh, deep.
Yeah. And I just got really into that for a while. And I was like, I ended up not getting into any programs after I graduated from undergrad. So I was terrified. And my dad pointed out this thing called a postfac that I could do at Columbia. And so I moved to New York City to just basically what that is. You just take classes at a prestigious institution.
Oh, nice.
And and it was cool. Like I did get a lot more insight into what academia is, and most importantly, learned that maybe it's not for me.
Right. Yeah, I guess you have to get to a certain level before you realize this is a lot of books.
Yeah, it's like so. Yeah, pretty much. It's just like a lot of books, and just you don't necessarily get to just burst in doing exactly what you want to do. You know, you spend a lot of years.
Yeah, but that's like everything. You got to build that base before you can do all the fun stuff.
And so that was kind of it. But I did get really good at it for a while. And then the thing that really shook me from it, because I did like improve, and the prospect of like getting into a PhD program did become a real prospect for me. But then this is my favorite part of the story, I had a meeting with my advisor, who is a delightfully strange Welshman named Gareth Williams. And he said stuff that stuck with me in a very angry sense for several years until I realized that what he was saying was actually extremely nice.
Yes. One of those gurus. Yeah, it's one of those gurus, like a classic thing. They give you the good advice, but you're too young to know what they mean, or you don't know that they're right, but they have been right all along.
Right. It's like when you said kill my family, you meant it metaphorically. I get it.
Yes.
Exactly. Damn it. Always. No. So he sat down with me, and he said, Philip, what is it exactly that you would like to do? And I said, I give a general response like I would like to teach classics at a higher level. I really like kind of modernizing ancient stories and putting them in contexts that make sense to the students that I'm transferring them. And he just kind of went like, yes. Well, let me ask you this, Philip. Have you ever considered being a detective? And I was like, what? And he was like, yes, a detective, Phil. You're a smart young man with a good degree from a good institution. We all support you. I just wonder what the NYPD would do with your application. Which there's no real response. I was not anticipating that direction for conversation.
Yeah, I did not see how that links to being good at Latin.
Right. And so I just kind of stared at him blankly, and he went, okay, or maybe something else, maybe. And then this is exactly what he said. He goes, maybe start a business with your friends selling silly walking canes to old people.
Yeah, okay.
Which, I just love this man.
$1 million idea.
Yeah, I was like, well, I've been doing that for years, Garrett. He was like selling silly walking canes, and then I didn't have actually any response to that, and he just went, or open a bar. I don't know, Philip. All I'm saying is you're young, and you can go out, and you can try anything. You can always come back to classics, and maybe just go out in there and see what the world has to offer.
Ah, yes, the old throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. I mean, that's just good advice, right? That's just good general life advice.
Oh, it's fantastic advice. Well, in like way more so than I even appreciated at all. Well, what happened at the time, I was angry, like super angry, because I thought I didn't yell at him or anything. I was just angry like, inside. But I kind of felt like he was being like, Philip, classics doesn't want you and nobody likes you and you're a failure. Now go home. basically is kind of what I heard. And that's not at all what he said, but that's what I heard. But like what I realized is like, yeah, exactly. He's like, there's enough people. I was 24 years old at the time. My entire experience had been that I studied Latin and I loved Latin and I was going into it. And that shouldn't be the only thing that carries me into classics. Go out there and develop a life worth talking about. Do something more exciting. Just go out and get other experiences.
Yeah.
Academics, is an interesting field, but it shouldn't be populated only by people who have only ever experienced that thing. You know, they should have world experience.
Need more Indiana Joneses.
Right, exactly. He was telling me, go out there, steal all the artifacts from India that you can.
Yeah, go battle Nazis, then come back and get tenure.
Steal the silly walking cane.
It all comes back to walking canes. So you left the meeting and you're like, forget you, Gareth.
Exactly. It's something like that. And I met up with a bunch of my friends. We talked about it, and they were all nice and consoling. And then I graduated. I got my MA. That was cool.
Congratulations.
And while I was in line, how was that?
Congratulations.
Thank you. You know, what a useful degree it's been. While I was in line at graduation, I actually ended up meeting the woman who is now my girlfriend.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah. It's the very definition of kismet or fate or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like literally the last day you could meet another student at your school.
Yeah, it's wild. It was pretty cool. Like, I think we're both really into the story, but we can't tell it too often because if you do, then
it loses something. So can we get a brief tangent Cole's Notes version of it? You're standing there, you drop your gown. Or you drop your hat. Drop trowel, because you're ready to streak, as you always do when you graduate.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you give us a brief synopsis?
Great pleasure. I was standing in the line segments for, like, walking and graduation were organized by the name of the field that you were getting a degree in. And so I was standing in classics, and I was also the only person standing under the classics insignia. No one else wants a master's degree in classics. How weird. So I'm standing by classics, and next to me is climate and society, which is what she got her degree in. And, she walks up, we look at each other, and we're standing there for a while. And she said something to me along the lines of just like, it looks like, you're going to be taken over by my department or something along those lines. And I made a joke back saying like, well, what would I do with that degree? I got this good classics degree to use. And there was much chuckling amongst us. And then we just chatted, and it went pretty well while we were sitting in the rows for all the graduation speeches. I noticed she sent me a friend request on Facebook because I kind of dropped my name a couple of times, maybe not, super on purpose.
Smooth.
Yeah. Maybe I gave her a couple of business cards and all my URLs. I don't know. Maybe I gave her a signed autograph.
You got the immediate Facebook friend ad before you're even done the conversation. Facebook ad.
Yeah.
That's a good sign.
So, yeah, it was, exactly. And I was like, she's cute. And that was neat. She sent me a friend request. I'd been trying to date for a long time on online apps, and that was a real no-go for me. I was going through a real pretentious period of my life, and so that's totally why.
All your profiles 100% in Latin, and no one can read them.
Yeah, I was like, none of you are educated enough to converse with me in Latin.
The woman who is for me will be able to understand my bio.
Yeah, clearly. That's what I was holding out for,
But luckily, you bumped into this person in line.
Yeah, Caitlin is her name.
Caitlin. And immediately became Facebook friends, hit it off right away, which is a great sign.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that, good kind of omen in the beginning, I sent her a message when I got back to my apartment, and it was like, hey, nice meeting you. What do you say we meet up for drinks, maybe food, and talk about our shiny new degrees?
Smooth.
Which is not a stellar message, but I really thought about it for a while.
Oh, nice. You had a draft. Working draft.
At it, being like, yeah, this is fine. I think this projects who I am. Or I'm the kind of guy who says things like shiny new degrees,
Shiny new degrees. Are we going with that? Yeah. Shiny new degrees.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. But consulted with several people. And then we did, and the first date itself went well, but this is where it cuts back into the comedy story. Pretty seamless how I've constructed this here.
Great segue.
Yeah. So we met up at a nice place in Midtown along the water. We're talking. I was feeling like directionless because now this entire thing that had controlled who I thought I was going to be when I grew up, being a professor, was suddenly no longer the controlling aspect of my personality. And so I was just personality-less. But what was cool is on our first date, we did kind of talk about, that opened me up to talk about things that weren't necessarily classics, and we just had a really good conversation, mostly about comedy and how much we loved comedy. And I mentioned that I really wanted to try stand-up comedy, and like New York was like a great place to do that, and I'm like 20s, blah, blah, blah. She was really supportive and encouraging, so that was cool.
That's the best.
And so, yeah, we went on a couple dates more. It went well. We're still together. In fact, I just moved in.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's quite a process.
That's a big step. Yeah, and I think you were talking about how you have to consolidate and pare down your stuff because you have two people's worth of stuff in a 1.5 person size apartment, probably.
Exactly. 2 people's worth of stuff and then some. Like 2 people's worth of stuff and then also strange artifacts that we've collected throughout our lives that we definitely don't.
Yeah. Somehow you accumulate all this stuff and now you have to go through the process of like, oh, do I really need this stuffed Mr. T? Like,
right.
Well, yes, of course I do.
Yeah, she's like, why do you have all these boxes full of silly old walking canes? I don't...
Yeah, the walking cane's gotta go.
It's gotta... And I'm like, that's my way in.
Yeah, that's your $1 million... That's our ticket out of here, baby.
Yeah, clearly. She's missing the big picture. No.
Okay, so you're together, you're on several dates, you're talking about starting comedy.
Right. And with that encouragement, I went out, and the story, as I have found out over the last... I've been doing comedy now for four whole years.
Nice.
And the story that basically underlies my initiation into comedy is actually a lot of people have the same sort of concept, which is I went to a couple of open mics and I just watched them. I just sat in the back and watched the open mics, and everybody was terrible because open mics are horrible.
Yes.
And I was like, I can also be really terrible. I can go up there and be horrible. And so I did. And here I am today being slightly, hopefully, less horrible.
Hooray.
Yeah.
How did it go your first time? Do you remember?
It was really great, actually. It was really supportive. I went to these mics in New York City that are really great for people who are just starting out, particularly, called Laughing Buddha. And I went up and I was like, this is my first time, and everybody started chanting, one of us, one of us. And that was really nice. And then I had this like whole 5-minute bit planned out that I can't do anything with anymore because it was a terrible bit, but I had been thinking about it really ever since I moved to New York, and I was like, I'm going to do comedy here someday. Even though I'm going to be a professor, I want to try stand-up at least once. And so it was like a bit that I had from real life, just telling stories at parties and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And what was the bit? What was it about?
It's to give it in brief.
Yeah.
It was about how I was walking down the street, and I saw these people who were evangelizing for some Christianity thing, and they called themselves, at their table was a big sign that said, the Bible Crusade. Right. And the whole point of my bit basically was like, you can't just like make a cause, but also reference the most horrific event in that cause's history.
Yeah, they already did one.
Right? Yeah, the Bible Crusade already happened. And
taken.
Thousands of people died. And so I was just like, what if there was one for the Quran and it was called the Quran Jihad, basically? And everyone was supportively like,
Everyone's like, he's new. This is his first time.
Yeah. And that bit didn't follow me around for much longer. I started doing other things that were also terrible. Like the first year of my comedy, I listened to those recordings of my open mics and just, I'm so sad if anybody formed a real opinion based on who I am in that year.
A little cringeworthy, but that is everybody's story. Everyone starts out having a tough time with it, and you really have to, grind it out to learn how to do your voice and all that good comedy stuff, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
All the hard lessons you learn on the streets of New York City.
Yeah, well, man, let me tell you, there's plenty of them. I went through all the most basic ones for comedy real early on. I'm glad I got those out of the way. But
yeah, do you have any notable stories about your time in the mean streets of the Big Apple?
Mean streets of New York. I would say the greatest comedy trauma kind of comes from it's a matter of duration, not really like one moment that you can really distill it to. I did this thing that's called barking.
Yes.
And it's what dogs do, but also what new comics do.
Yes. So for the listeners, that's when you go out and you have flyers or you're on the street trying to drum up business for the old comedy club.
Exactly. And so I would just stand out on the streets, and it gets so tiresomely repetitive to say, hey, free comedy show. And your voice becomes this horrible parody of what a hack comedian sounds like for some reason. Like throughout advertising the show, you'll start off being like, free comedy show tonight, come on, check it out. And by the end of like 2 hours, you're like, free comedy show.
Your voice has to do that to survive.
Yeah, exactly. It just becomes unintelligibly hacky somehow.
So you're barking.
The process of that is so just soul sucking. Like, because you're just standing there, and not only are people ignoring you, and you are trying to kind of engage them, but you're also battling with this thing where it's like, I know this is annoying, and I have to participate in it.
Yeah.
And then, even worse, is when people try to engage with you, but they're, like, mean for no reason.
Not no reason. They're in New York City.
Yeah, they're mean because it's New York City, and everyone's, like, walking around carrying...
You gotta be a certain level of mean just to survive.
Decades of hate. Yeah. So people just kind of, like, I wish I had a better specific example, but people just unleash on you just this angry thing that you dare to speak to them in public. And, like, I could do comedy, I could go up there. That's the one you hear the most, and it's the most upsetting. Where it's like, I'm a comedian at home. It's like, oh, my God, please. People who suggest how you should be barking instead were like, you should put on a big costume. And I'm like...
Yeah, you ever get one of those big signs? You get the big sign, and you spin that sign, and then I will come to your comedy show.
You should become one of those giant inflatable arm flailing things. Why don't you do that?
You ever think about getting into silly canes?
Yeah. Gareth, why do you follow me everywhere?
He just shows up, and he's trying to tell you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, barking is soul-crushing. You're dealing with the throng of the populace of New York City every day, just the crush of people, and you're trying to get one or two people just to please come and see a comedy show.
Exactly. And then to top it all off, the show that you're barking for, you get time to go on. You're allowed to go up for 5 whole minutes at the very end of the show, which I might add is a far too long of a show. It is usually like a 2-hour show. I'd say most people's attention spans cap out at like 1 hour.
Right.
So it's just cruelly too long. So by the time you're up, nobody's paying attention. Everybody's tired. They realize the drinks are too expensive. Nobody wants to be there or pay for more drinks.
Mm-mm.
And then you get to go up there and be like, I'm dorky and people don't like me. Or, like...
yeah, and they're like, that's that guy who made me come here.
Yeah, exactly. And so then you're just this avatar for them of the thing that is causing their current plight. And you're there for 5 minutes and no one likes you. Or, God forbid, they verbally acknowledge that they don't like you.
Oh, talking about hecklers.
Oh, I don't have great heckler stories, to be perfectly honest, except the biggest hecklers in my life have been people who are really into my act, actually. They really like it, and they just keep contributing to it too much.
They're like, I'm helping.
Yeah, but they always think it's helpful. And on one case, actually in 2 cases, were delightful old women who felt great sympathy for me.
That's the problem, the empathy heckle.
Yeah, where it's just like, I can't even be mad at you. You just feel bad for me, which I guess that's nice.
Yeah, it's better than the angry heckle, but it's not much better.
Yeah, precisely. There was like an elderly black woman when I was still barking. So it was at the end of the night, and she was in the club, and I was doing my act. And again, this was in my first year of comedy, so I don't fault her at all for her critique. But her critique was, right after one of my jokes bombed, she went, "Oh, darling, she goes, "Oh, darling, you corny." And I didn't have anything for that. I just trembled and looked at my hand to see what joke was next. And it kind of recovered because I looked at my hand and everyone could see it, and I went, oh, weird. All over my hand it just says, you can do it, don't worry. And and that kind of pulled me out of it. It wasn't the best joke, but... Yeah,
that's the whole thing, right? That's one of the little lessons. You got to learn how to bounce right back, sort of water off the duck's back of the heckle from the nice heckle from the lady. Like, yeah. Oh, sweetie.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, yeah, exactly. She just feels bad. I had a British woman... But my other favorite is there was a British woman who I said a joke, and this is like more recently in my career, so my jokes are doing fine. But like one of my jokes does end on a kind of a sad note, and people laughed, and then when the laughter disappeared, just this British woman in the back went, "Oh, Duddy," which is I've never heard that phrase before. Oh, Duddy. And so I was like, "What is Duddy?" And she's like, "Oh, darling." It just means, "Oh, dearie." I feel very bad for you. And I was just like, well, thank you. That's why I'm here. Really just sympathy. And it went well. But
great. So now you're 4 years in doing comedy. You moved away from classics a little bit into the more comedy sphere. And sort of that brings us up to present day from your tale.
Indeed. And now I'm the mayor of New York City. So here we are in my penthouse.
Yeah. Ban those large sodas. Was that you?
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my campaign since the beginning.
Pretty good. I can get behind that. Well, thank you very much, Phil, for that lovely tale. And everyone should now know and empathize with you and your life's work.
Hey, gladly.
Lovely. So now we move on to Phil's favorite tweets.
Hell yeah.
This is the tweet from Phil Stamato. Wow. You want to talk about that? You have that as your name. On Twitter, it's Phil Stamato, and then in brackets, or in parentheses, wow.
Yeah. That's just because whatever. Twitter feeds into some weird things where I just feel bad all the time about myself. I hate it. But also love it. It's hard to get around it, So that wow thing was kind of born after, me being when people get notifications that I like their tweet, and it's Phil Stamato liked their tweet. I imagine that they're just who's Phil Stamato?
Right.
So I was what if I made it so that when they read my name, they had to be Phil Stamato, wow.
That is perfect. It works every single time I see it come up. I'm Phil Stamato, wow.
Wow, this is really turning my day around.
Yeah.
I like my tweets.
When you get one of those premium notifications, that's what you do it for.
Exactly.
Okay, so your first tweet that you have selected is... it's a conversation between Ares and Zeus, as you would, right? Classics. So the tweet is, Greek gods prepping for a night out. Ares says, flannel shirt it is. Zeus, what are you wearing? Zeus is a swan. And Ares is huh? And then Zeus is a swan. It's just a classic Zeus being a swan because he takes on the form of animals.
Right.
And that's what he's wearing. He's pulling Bjork. Is it a Bjork reference?
No Bjork intended. I was going for Lady Gaga, actually. Yeah.
Meat dress.
Absolutely.
So this one obviously tickles your fancy of the Greek gods, right? So definitely into your classics knowledge.
Oh yeah, it's based on Zeus in all of mythology. The main thing he seems to do a lot is he gets with women, lots of them, most of them not his wife. But he always takes on the form of an animal when he does it for some reason. He can't just be Zeus, king of the gods. That's not enough for some reason.
You can't just show up as Zeus.
Yeah, exactly. It's
paparazzi will be on you.
Why do you have to be an animal? So he takes on the form of an animal, and one of them is he takes on the form of a swan, and he gets with this figure named Leda. And I just love the idea of Ares and Zeus prepping for a night out, the rose night out of the town.
Yeah, so this is the
and
before.
Yeah, exactly. The before, the pre-game. And Zeus is just the swan the whole time getting ready.
Yeah, he's ready. Ares is combing his hair and he's what are you wearing? Are you ready? And Zeus is ready to go, already just a swan.
Yeah. He's yeah, this is it, man. What are you talking about?
Presumably a very cool swan, right? To be able to pull like that?
Yeah, it's a swan, but with sunglasses on.
That's what I imagine it, yeah. Just the coolest swan. Doesn't even need to say anything, just sort of walks in and all the ladies start swooning.
Exactly. They all start swanning, huh?
Yeah. All right, well, thank you for that lovely tweet. The next Phil Stamato wow tweet that I will read is this one. There is an alternate universe where there's a band called Blink 1, another with Blink 2, etc. And we are just Blink Universe number 182.
Hell yeah.
Shout out to Twitter user Mark Hoppus, who is now part of the Twitter retweet community. So shout out to that. And Blink-182, obviously one of my favorite bands growing up as a wee punk dude in the early 2000s.
Early 2000s, that's hard to abbreviate.
It is. The aughts. So yeah, how'd you come up with that? I guess this is sort of string theory or something.
Yeah, I was just hanging out in the shower thinking about alternate universes. That's what I think we all do, right? And this is one of those shower tweets where you have it, and then you take the shower, and you're I can't forget this, and then you get out, and you're I need a computer or a phone immediately. Mm-hmm. The world must know of my brilliance. And I just thought, I was why is it Blink-182? What's the origin of that? And I was also, were there Blinks 1 through 181 all the way through that?
Yeah, the classic, will I understand Blink-182 if I haven't heard Blinks 1 through 181?
Right. And I also just loved the idea that, alternate universe theories are so much fun. They're my favorite tweets every time because it's always absurd and ridiculous, but technically possibly true.
You can't forget.
Right?
It's totally possible.
as funny as it is to be like, there's a universe where it's a Blink 182, and there's a universe where it's Blink, 69 or something silly. Like, that's real. Like, there could be an alternate universe.
Get Stephen Hawking in here. He's like, yep.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I should tweet that at Neil deGrasse Tyson, see if he supports the theory.
Well, he can't debunk it, I don't think. I think this is backed by science.
Exactly.
CC Mark Hoppus.
Very in favor.
Okay, so we are in Blink Universe 182.
Yeah.
And the third and final Phil Stamato tweet. Flutes used to be made out of bones, so technically they're the most badass instrument of all. He mumbled from inside his locker.
Hell yeah.
So this is a good one. It's writing. It's like classically written. A lot of these tweets are sort of formats where you're like, this person says this person says that. But this one is written like it's a book. And that's great. Right. I love those ones. And Bat Karen does too. So, tell us about it.
I tried to make that like a dialogue treat like several times, but like every single time I made it into a dialogue-y thing, it just kind of looked overburdened by too much text or whatever. So it just kind of came out that way more formally. But
beautiful. I love to hear the process when it starts as one thing, ends up as another, and here we are with mumbling from inside the locker. That's the punchline. And
I hope that speaks to everybody. If you're ever into like something really dorky, sincerely, that's my favorite thing about other nerdy people, like people in classics and stuff like that, is everybody who loves the thing they love feels like it's like actually a really cool thing and people just don't understand.
Yes.
And so in the meanwhile, you're being stuffed in a locker, but you're like, no, flutes are so cool.
Yeah. It's a classic nerd trope. But it's right. So that does sound cool. Have you ever played a bone flute?
Never played a bone flute. But they did, the word for flutes in Latin is tibia. And that's the word for your tibia because it was in fact made out of tibia.
That is straight up the same.
Yeah. Which is pretty metal, man,
Yeah, that is pretty badass. So thank you for educating us on the history of flutes.
More people should know.
Beautiful. Now we come to Phil's picks from others. And so the first tweet I have here is from Sun Tzu Fun Tzu on Twitter. And his tweet is like this. What if Waldo finds me first? I asked naively. Grandma closes the book. The blood drains from her face. Don't let that happen, she warns.
I love that so much.
Classic Sun Tzu Fun Tzu.
Yeah. I just love the ones that are just like that take something so stupid and silly and turn it into something potentially like life-threatening.
Yeah, like the blood drains from her face. It's like incredibly serious, this grandma.
Oh, it's so good.
Don't let it happen. It's a warning. Yeah. So, yeah, that was a good one. Sun Tzu Fun Tzu. That's SUNTZUFUNTZU on Twitter. So, guess you're pals with Sun Tzu Fun Tzu? Pretty nice guy.
I'm not, actually. I've never actually interacted with him in any personal level outside of just liking him, responding to some of his tweets.
Oh, great. So, yeah, he tweets a lot of sort of strange and weird stuff. But,
right down my alley. I love those.
So everyone, check that out. Do you have the tweets in front of you? Perhaps maybe get you to read one of these.
Oh, yeah, gladly. The next one is from another account that I'm a fan of, from Warm Yellow Light. Some days I'm all sound of a fluffy cloud violently smashing into a mountain. Other days I'm sound of crocodiles gently eating a mitten.
That's great. A lot of really great imagery in this one.
Yeah.
A fluffy cloud violently smashing into a mountain.
and then also crocodiles gently eating a mitten.
Crocodiles gently eating, which doesn't make any sense. And a mitten. So
you just picture them just gnawing on it lightly. I think it's just funny imagery to begin with, but then it's also like it does actually have a funny kind of relatable point where it's like sometimes I just feel like I'm full of a weird, contradictory, unnameable feeling. Where you're like two feelings that kind of collide,
Yeah, so great imagery, and it really, captures that feeling, the uncapturable feeling of life. So thank you at Warm Yellow Light. Everyone definitely check out that person. They are very good. So the final tweet you have selected from literally hundreds of tweets you could have selected. So
and this one's not funny. I just I think it's it interacts with a classical reference, and it interacts with one of my favorite points in classical mythologies, and she just put it together really well. I think it was part of a larger context, but this is from Space Girl. I Am Space Girl. And it just says, it's not funny at all, so I'm sorry about that, everybody listening, but it just says, Daedalus follows the trail of feathers out to sea, pressing each wet fragment of memory to his lips before sinking with the setting sun.
Ooh, Sky painting the picture with her words. Very poetic. Yeah. Very poetic. So, what are the references here that we're missing?
So it's from Daedalus and Icarus, and that myth gets really condensed a lot. So it doesn't convey the same emotions that it used to a long time ago.
Right.
And it's always been one of the most emotionally resonant myths to me, because you have this when you see the whole story. Daedalus is trapped in a tower on Crete with his son Icarus, and he's painted in all the myths as this like really lovable dad who like really just loves his kid, and his kid is an adorable child who's like curious and running around and playing and just doing what kids do. And you watch this trajectory where like he builds these wings, because Daedalus is a brilliant architect and kind of engineer. He builds these brilliant wings to help him and his son finally escape from the tower of evil King Minos. And they fly out, and he says, Icarus, who's again is an adorable little kid, so it's hard to get kids to do what you want them to do.
Mm-hmm.
He says, just don't fly too close to the sun, because, the thing holding this together is wax. That's all I could get in this tower. So don't fly too close to the sun or else it'll melt. And Icarus flies up. They both fly, and they're having a great time. Daedalus is, leading the way because he knows where to go. If you get the whole story, there's all these beautiful scenes of him floating out under the night sky and pointing out constellations to his son, which is also really heartwarming.
Just being a good dad.
Being a really good dad. I love it. And then the sun comes up, and Icarus gets carried away, and he starts flying towards the sun, but it's been a while. Daedalus wasn't looking back. He turns around, and he sees his son falling to earth, and then all the dialogues and all the myth, especially Ovid's, I love Ovid the most of all, really gives you the kind of what's called, not to use a really pretentious term, pathos, like the real emotional experience of suffering of Daedalus calling out to his son and hoping that he won't fall, and he does. And then this is what her thing actually kind of refers to in a way that I love, is all the myths cover, like Daedalus crops up in all these other stories as this man who is just ruined by trying to escape from the tower, and then once he did, he could never really move on because he misses his son. And it's really beautiful.
Yeah, that's great. And it sort of is like the lesson, eternal lesson of like, no matter how much you watch after your kids, at some point they're going to have to go out on their own, and you can't always protect them. So it's sort of just like a eternal lesson in these tales, right?
Yeah. There's one other good heart-moving depiction of Daedalus is in the Aeneid, where the main character arrives in Italy and he goes to this temple, and Daedalus arrived in this version of mythology. They all have different versions. It's like the comic book universe. You can kind of do whatever you want. And in this version of that universe, Daedalus made it to Italy, and he erected a temple to his son. And not to his son. He erected a temple to the local Sibyl, the god, basically, their god. But he was decorating the front doors of the temple by hammering out on bronze little scenes of what happened to him in Icarus. So building the labyrinth, and then the labyrinth goes awry, and Theseus comes and screws it up, and then he gets trapped in the castle, and he escapes the castle. And then this is where it's beautiful. The way it's depicted in the Latin, he hammers once. Well, he starts depicting his son falling from the sky, and it's harder to bring his hammer back out the second time, but he hammers it down a second time. But by the time he brings it back for the third strike, he can't bring himself to do it, and he drops the hammer, and he never completes it.
Oh, because he's too emotionally wrought.
Yeah, there's an emo kid that lives deep inside me, and he'll never leave me. But,
wow. Well, thank you for that backstory of that. Hopefully everyone checks out the Daedalus tales.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for selecting those tweets. Very good. And definitely everyone follow all the people whose tweets Phil selected. They're some of the best. And now we turn to Twitter for questions. And the first question comes from the lovely @markedly Mark McGark. Everyone check out Making Friends with Mark McGark at McGarkPod on Twitter. One of the best.
Big fan.
He asks 5 questions. So let's take these one at a time. Question number 1. Why are you so smart?
It's a hard one to answer, but here's the thing. As the smartest man alive, if I were to answer that question, I would erase all of humanity. So
wow.
I'm afraid I can't answer it.
Well, I have a lot of follow-ups,
I know, it's
but
a heavy burden to bear.
I don't think you'll answer them.
Yeah.
Okay. I would just assume a lot of schooling.
Yeah. Well, I don't. I've had people I think know my background in studies, and they're like, "You must be super smart." And most of the time, I feel kind of dumb, so it's confusing to me. But that's, I think, how life works, or something.
Yeah, I agree.
But I've had a lot of book learning.
Yeah, you're book learned.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. All right, question number 2 from Mark McGark. How many languages can you understand? Not speak. Understand.
Which is a good distinction to make, actually, because really getting to that point of speaking it is a very different, that's the hardest part of it all, right?
Oh, for sure. And I think you demonstrated a very good ability to sort of read it out loud at the beginning. So what is it, 2? 3? 16?
So I've got English, and I can read and understand Latin.
Nice.
And produce it, too. Yeah, I can write it.
And can you make up new words? Because you were talking about these Neo-Latin people. Like, what's the Latin word for YouTube? What's the Latin word for Twitter? What's the Latin word for retweet? Like, it seems like there's a lot of opportunities for someone to, like, pen a new Latin dictionary. Or, like, the Latin Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, and there's like, enough Latin out there in the world to create new things. So, like, a tweet in Latin is a pipiatio. Which is
what?
Just like pipiatio. Yeah, it sounds a little a little dubious, huh? But I mean, it's like it's related to peep, you know?
Right. Tweet, but, like peep a tweet. Yeah.
Peep a tweet.
Peep that tweet.
But other stuff is pretty straightforward. It's like YouTubers. You know, like,
you just have to add OS on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Facebookos.
Facebookos Maximus.
All right, well, that's good to know. So many languages.
Yeah, I would. So just to quickly enumerate them, it's English, Latin, Greek, Modern Greek, French, Italian, and I'll leave it there because I used to be able to know more, but then those have disappeared from my abilities.
Molto bene, très bon.
Sì, molto bene.
Nice. That's very good. So the third question from Mark is Catholicism?
Boy, I think that's the best question of all. I'm not sure exactly how to respond to it. Catholicism, great question. I had so many sentences to begin with. I went to Catholic school my whole life. One thing that you hear a lot is anyone who goes to Catholic school usually ends up not liking Catholicism. Mm-hmm. And I was one of those. I really hated it. The more time I spend away from it and the more stuff about Catholicism I read by people who are like more thoughtful about it than maybe the nuns and priests that I had, the more I kind of actually think it's pretty cool. I'm not religious personally, but, Catholicism has some interesting elements to it.
So the answer is, has some interesting elements to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like they got that smoky swing on a chain thing.
Yeah. Honestly, that's what I was talking about. That's pretty much it.
That's really pretty much my favorite thing about Catholicism, too. The first time I saw that, it's like a pole with a chain and then like a little lantern that like is on fire and they smoke up the church. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it does, but I'm down for it.
Everybody super high. It's weird.
Yeah. And then munch down on the body of Christ. Everyone gets the munchies.
Yeah.
And get a sip of wine. Why not? Get this party started.
So yeah, thirsty and stuff, So
can't be all bad. I mean,
right.
The fourth question: is it fun writing for Splitsider?
Yes, by and large.
By and large, bylines and large lines.
Bylines and large lines. Yeah, it's cool. I think the part I enjoy the most about it is when I'm done with working on like editing an interview and stuff, and it goes up.
Yes, that satisfaction.
Yeah, as a person who edits interviews and podcasts, your stuff, you're aware with the work that goes into this.
Oh, for sure. And it does feel good getting that episode posted with no errors.
Right.
Whenever that happens.
Yeah, and so that can be overwhelming, but the feeling of the finished product is really great. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that is good. And I guess you get to, see comedy from different angles and really analyze it. And we know from your earlier story that you're super into that, as am I. So yeah, I think that's really very cool. Splitsider, a cool publication. I definitely check it out on the regular.
Heck yeah.
And we come to Mark's fifth and final question. What is kissing?
Yeah, I'm glad he asked that. I've been trying to figure that one out for years. No idea, to be honest.
You and Mark both.
I don't know if I've ever seen it or, But,
all right, well, I guess we'll just have to agree to not know. So
exactly.
You're asking the wrong guy, Mark. Asking the wrong guy.
Never kissed. Man who's never done any kissing. I'm not going to lie. I've done some smooching, but never any kissing.
Right. So. Well, a smooch is better than a kiss.
A smooch is way better than a kiss, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark, for those questions. Definitely everyone follow @Markedly on Twitter and check out his podcast, Making Friends with Mark McGark. Next question comes from the Timmy Toes, friend of the show, Timmy. Hello. Shout out to Timmy. Can't wait to get him on. And the questions that he asks are, what's the best live performance you've ever been to? He qualifies this: music, stage, etc.
Okay. Yeah, it was really good. It wasn't just the man I watched have a mental breakdown in public.
Well, I guess that is included. It's under the etc. But yeah.
Right. Well, great question. I honestly, when I was in college, early in college, like late high school, I was really into ska. Hate me, whatever you want to do. And I got to go see Catch-22.
Ah, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, and ska is so fun to see live. Skanking is really fun. You get to dance and move around and hear the music. So Catch-22, one of the best.
Wow, Catch-22, shout out, deep cut. I briefly dabbled in ska, and Catch-22 had that track 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
So shout out to Catch-22 and all the ska fans out there. Skank away, my friends.
Yeah.
You don't want to get kicked, though, right? Some people.
You don't want to get kicked. You got to be real careful with it.
When they're in the pit, they're going to punch and kick. Okay, thank you for that. And Timmy, thank you for the question. Next question from Timmy is, which light switch is better, little nub or flat plate?
This is the question that broke my family apart. No, I like the little nub because you can. It's not ambiguous. You know it's there. You smash your hand against the wall and it's there. And plus, you can't accidentally smash your hand against it and change the light switch.
Oh, true. Yeah, I never really thought about this until I got this question. I'm going to say little nub, too.
Oh, yeah.
Little nub.
I'm glad we're amongst good people.
It's the only right answer.
Right. I would kill for this.
All right, cool. Well, I figured I would also recycle an old question from friend of the show, Space Cat @Catstronomical, because Sarah asks the best questions, and whenever I don't get one from her, I kind of still want to get one from her. So These are some questions from Sarah. Who are your favorite Twitter accounts and why?
My favorite Twitter accounts and why? Good question. My favorite Twitter account, my own. Now, I really liked Ruse, so Really Wood, Danny.
The Really Wood, friend of the show. Check him out, episode number 2.
He's got some solid tweets out there.
And incredibly
nice.
Warm Yellow Light. Yeah, you picked her tweet as one of your picks.
Yeah, she's I kind of like what she does specifically because she doesn't necessarily always tweet just like jokes. They're like kind of narrative. About what's going on in her life, but like in a not necessarily real way. I don't know. They're just really fun to follow.
Yes. Warm Yellow Light. Great pick. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you. That's great. The second part of her question is, what's something you've always wanted to do, but you haven't got the chance to?
Something I've always wanted to do, but I haven't got the chance to.
That is the question posed by @Catstronomical.
Easy. Kill a drifter.
Kill a drifter. Oh, no, something that you haven't got the chance to do.
Oh, right. Sorry, good point. Easily enough, I think it would be skydiving. I always wanted to go
skydiving. Yeah, so you think you would do that. You would jump out of a plane. You know, the parachute doesn't always open.
Oh, boy. I guess probably a part of the thrill, but most of the time it does. It's like 99% of the time, right? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yep. But like I said, not every time. Not every time. Okay, so that's very cool. I don't know. When I was younger, I think I wanted to more, and now as I'm older, I'm like, better not risk it.
Sure.
Okay, and she also asks, embarrassing story?
Embarrassing story.
Maybe not too embarrassing.
This one time, I studied Latin and Greek for 10 years. Now,
oh, no, that's nothing gets more embarrassing than that.
Yeah, it's pretty embarrassing. Pretty classic embarrassment. Yeah, a lot of embarrassing stories. Mostly every time I get drunk and then speak. Drinking for me is a bad thing.
Right.
But I just sound like an idiot. I'm going to go with, the easiest one offhand is just a classic when I was like 14 years old, having to go give a presentation in front of the class. Being a 14-year-old boy, had a tiny but mighty erection.
Uh-oh.
And it was quite an embarrassment. I tried to conceal it by doing that thing where you like move your leg a little, but then I just kind of did a weird Captain Morgan stamp.
Yeah, you're doing the Ashley Simpson jig from SNL.
Yeah, and somehow that just makes it way worse. So
yeah, there was no podium, I'm guessing. There's no desk or anything you're just out there.
Yeah, no, I went up with like my papers for my presentation, obviously trying to conceal that.
Yeah.
And
that looks supernatural.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, this isn't natural. This isn't a thing a normal human does.
Well, there you go. I think that definitely counts as an embarrassing story. So thank you very much to everyone who has submitted questions. You can submit a question at FOTSpod, and it will be asked to a future guest. So thank you to everyone. And I guess that brings us to the end of the podcast. So if there's anything that you would like to promote, definitely everyone check out Phil's writing on Splitsider and philstamato.com.
Oh, yeah. And I also I got a cool comedy show in New York City. If you're ever passing through and you're here on the last Friday of the month, I got a fun, cool underground comedy show called Nothing Important, and that's at a place called Friends and Lovers.
Very cool. Everyone check that out. New York City, the Big Apple.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess that's it. So now without further ado, I will play the podcast music, which means the show is ending. So thank you, Phil.
Hey, thank you.
It was great, and hope to see you on the big comedy stages in the near future.
I hope to see myself there.
That's right. So, and thanks everyone for listening. Catch you next time. Well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode with Phil. Be sure to follow at FOTSpod and send a question for future guests. Thanks to Ruby Coast for providing the music. Please visit StephenWSkinner.com for all the episodes, or subscribe and get a new episode delivered every Monday. Please follow @SkinnerSteven on Twitter, and thank you for listening. Have a great one.